baby, it's witchcraft contagious. I've felt it for ages. We're out of these cages in this house of mages. It's witchcraft, it's dangerous. Beware of these pages. There's spells of all flavors in this house of mages. In this house of mages.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the House of Mages podcast, Magical Musings for Mischievous Minds. I'm your host, Daniel Leat. Let's get straight into the episode. Today, I have Jenelle Leat with me. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So yeah, I've been wanting to chat with you for a while because I think initially I saw you just in the Sunshine Coast community groups and pages, and what I really liked was you sharing about the successes and the struggles of you running a yoga studio at the time. And I've just seen little bits and pieces of you and your journey develop. And it's funny because you've been on my mind as a guest that I wanted to get on eventually, but a few of the posts that you put up that have caused a bit of maybe mischief or a bit of conversations that really needed to be had. Kind of prompted me to reach out, and it just happened to be really good timing because you're leaving back to Canada soon. So I just wanted to start off with your journey both into running your own studio, but also just into yoga in general.
Okay, I have to compress it. Well, my very first yoga class, I did not like at all. My sister took me, and I was like, this is so boring. And I think it was just like a vinyasa or something like that. And then it was maybe a year or two later, and a friend of mine was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this hot yoga. Like, you do yoga and you're hot, and then when you pee afterwards, your pee's really hot. I remember her saying that, and I was like, okay, I guess I need hot pee. And then, and she was super into it, so I was like, okay, I'll try it. And having come from a really quite serious like ballet background, that was my career, like the career that I wanted to have. But I had a lot of injuries, and so there came a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I was really looking for something that was going to fulfill what I didn't realize at that time. I thought it was like the movement aspect, which I do believe that was a part of it, but I really see was a lot of like the performance aspect. And Bikram yoga was like totally fit that. It was like, I can perform in here and I'll be praised, you know? So that was something that just like in comparison to the first yoga class I did, that one was like, that was like meeting all of my addictions at that time. You know what I mean? And I'm sure there were aspects of it that were obviously helpful for me to move forward, you know, in my life, and it was purposeful. But yeah, I totally drank the Kool-Aid, and I was like in that community, and then I was praised for my flexibility, and so that made me feel really special. And then I was told I should do teacher training, and that made me feel even more special. And you know, there would be certain people who would practice in that practice that were encouraged to go to teacher training. Knowing what I know now, I can see why that is. But I mean, I was super passionate about the practice. So there was that, but also I was, you know, a young woman, and I did yoga poses, you know, in a way that they wanted me to. And so I mean, I didn't see any of that at that time, but I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to do this. And I was also looking for something that felt as important to me as when I cared about ballet, because I was missing that. After I quit, I was like, had this identity crisis. Who am I if I'm not a ballet dancer? Like, I'd put everything into that. I went to a special school where I would, you know, we'd only do academics in the morning, and then the third floor of the school was the ballet school. And so it was very serious. And so when I didn't have that, I was actually really looking for something to kind of replace that, and Bikram yoga was that for me. So I was just in. I was totally in. And
did they have competitions around it as well? Because I've heard, I don't know if because Bikram runs competitions.
I did all that. I competed like for Canada, and then when I moved to Australia, I competed for Australia, and I qualified, and so I competed internationally, and I placed like 4th in the world out of 30 women or something like that from all these different countries. And yeah, it was a big thing that really, again, met that addiction of mine of like performance and being rewarded externally.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I really got into all of that. So I did my competitions, and I did my yoga teacher training, and I went, that was in 2007, and that was with Bikram in Hawaii. And it was like, it was torture.
Yeah.
I hated it because I wanted so badly to perform, and we did 2 classes every day. Sometimes those classes were 2 hours, like in the heat. It was like a battlefield, and it was all about suffering, you know? And I wanted to be able to perform, but I was like at my max point of suffering physically. And so it was just like really, it was a big challenge for me. Like, and it's, you know, obviously teacher training, no matter what you do, is challenging in so many different ways, whether you're doing something that's like, you know, as boot campy as Bikram yoga or not. But for me, it was just, there was a lot of things that I was facing. But I came out of that and I was like, I'm going hard, I'm teaching, and like just taught as many classes as I possibly could, and really wanted to be a part of the inner circle. And I wanted to be a part of that community, and I wanted to be known, you know, because I cared about the practice. But then there was that side of me as well. As I said, that was like, I want to be acknowledged, and I want to perform, and I want to show up in a way that like other people will validate, right? So I just really got sucked into all of that, and I was still doing competitions, and I, was teaching a heap. And then I was like, okay, how can I still keep getting on this inner circle? I want to now travel and teach, because that's what a lot of Bikram yoga teachers did, because these studios were all over the world. And so, the community was very like incestual. So everyone knew everyone. There was 1 degree of separation, and all you had to do was just go, hey, I know so-and-so, can I come teach at your studio? And it's like, yeah, no problem. Send me pictures of you doing dancer's pose. Like, I'm not joking. And this is how actually you got to be on staff for teacher training. And that was my next kind of thing. Was, okay, you need to send Bikram the following pictures of you doing these poses.
Which is interesting, because you're not even demonstrating in Bikram, are you?
No, you're just talking.
Yeah.
It's just dialogue. A like script, if you will. And so I sent my photos, and I was like really excited, and I got my recommendations. And at that time, one of the studio owners that I got a recommendation from had said to me, I just really want you to be aware, because she had just been on staff at a previous teacher training that was in Acapulco in Mexico. And I went to visit that one actually, and like volunteer my time and stuff. And you don't get paid for this, you just go and you volunteer your time because you're so dedicated. And she said to me, I just want you to be aware that there's some things that are happening that are not great, And she gave me an example of one of the other women that she was on staff with, and she said, Bikram tried to do this with her. And I was like, I had heard little whispers, but it's not something you want to think is true. So you have cognitive dissonance, and you just shut it out. And I was like, okay, but like the part of me that wanted all this to happen did not want to entertain that as a possibility in any way, shape, or form. So I just kind of like wrapped it up and like put it, to the side. And so then I went, and I was on staff, and this was in Vegas. Yeah. So I was there for about 3 months in total, because I had to be there prior just to, do some preliminary stuff. And within my first week of being there, I had a situation with Bikram where we was like a few of us in his room, all women, and just slowly, one by one, he just dismissed, oh, you leave now. Oh, you can go now. And then it was just me and him.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was like nighttime, we were told very often, like, Bikram can never be alone. Like, we were groomed as people who were on staff by other senior teachers or other people who had been on staff. Bikram just always needs people around him.
Okay.
He can never be alone. So you're dedicated to this community. You're dedicated to the practice because you felt such a, I felt so connected to it. I was in it. I was like addicted to the feeling of the torture of the practice,
Yeah.
And I invested so much time and money into my teacher training and everything. And mind you, like this teacher training was $10,500, and that was almost 20 years ago. That was not cheap back then for a training.
Yeah.
And that didn't even include your flight to get there, your your food, anything like that. So, you're really invested. So anything that would threaten that, you really easily just want to push it away.
Yeah.
Right? So, I just was in his room with him, and he was requesting that I touch him in certain places. And I so deeply believed that he knew what was good for me, that I knew it was wrong, but I still believed that he wouldn't hurt me. You're just so in this warped, conditioned psychology of, as I said, I fully drank the Kool-Aid, that I just couldn't believe that he would do something that was inappropriate or ask something of me, but I couldn't leave.
Yeah.
I couldn't leave. And I'm thinking, because the way that he operates is like public beheading. So if you do something, he would literally put a note on the website that said, Jenelle Leat is no longer allowed to teach at any of my studios. And everyone would follow suit in the world, globally, unless they were already like on the outs, and so you just wouldn't get a job.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, if I leave, he's going to kick me off of being on staff. Like teacher training had just started. We had 9 weeks there. That was in the first week. And I just felt paralyzed, and I couldn't leave. Eventually he fell asleep. And so I justified to myself, because what I did was I did sign in for the 7 a.m. class.
Yeah.
And so it was about 4 a.m. And like I just, was there. He was watching his Bollywood movies and, requesting these things of me. And so he eventually went to bed, fell asleep. I'm sitting there still thinking, I can't leave because he can't be alone, and if I leave, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get kicked off of staff.
Okay.
I'm not going to have a job. I've invested so much in this, like just so many things, And then I justified to myself it was okay to leave, because if he says anything, I'll say, I had to go do the job that you brought me here to do. And I could justify it.
Yeah.
It's enough that I'm uncomfortable and this is not okay.
Yeah.
But again, I was just so in that space of like not believing that he didn't have good intentions, right?
Yeah.
And so I left and, spoke to like a few other teachers that were on staff as well. And one woman who had been teaching for a long time, and she was a senior teacher, and she was like, yeah, you just can't be alone with him. That was it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's it. Like, instead of saying, yeah, we should actually like bring awareness to this behavior, it's just everyone else walk on eggshells.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to say anything to him. We don't want to disrupt him, So that was, and then I was on staff, for the 9 weeks of the teacher training. And like every time I saw him, I was like, you're a fucking asshole and you're a liar. And, like just going through my whole process of what happened and how that felt for me. And so, that really framed a lot for me in the way of like, just planting a little seed of starting to question things.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense now, what I've seen of you kind of rebelling against this dogma and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's really important, like, and it kind of needs to happen, like, ideally not in such a horrible way, but for people to kind of, like, unpedestal their teachers.
Yeah.
Because, I've had that with my original teachers, where I had a really bad situation that made me realize, like, wow, they're just human and they make really shitty decisions and hurt people sometimes. And,
totally.
And
it's not okay to excuse it.
Yeah.
And that's what was happening, was like, I would bring it up to other people, and it was just this one woman even said to me, one senior teacher, I said, why don't we do anything about it? Because she goes, the same thing happened to me at my training. I mean, I wasn't at my training, I was volunteering, but, and I said, why don't we do anything about it? And she's like, he's too powerful. Like, isn't that fucked?
Yeah.
Right? Like, just this whole idea that just another human being holds so much power. Like, who's letting him have that power? We are.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so we're all responsible in a way. And that's like a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really why I feel so passionate about integrity and ownership and responsibility and empowerment, because it can just like be gone like that if you allow others around you to perpetuate this false narrative that you have about yourself. And that's what was happening. No one's calling him on his shit.
Yeah.
You know, and it was at a point where he had built up enough of, you know, of a following, enough of a core group around him that people will protect him.
Yeah.
Men, women that it had happened to, you know, and so seeing that obviously lit a fire under me that I was like, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
But I was still so bought in that, and still so unwilling to give up potentially to give up what it was that I thought I was wanting to create.
Yeah. And was there this instilling of there is nothing outside of this and there is no potential
100%,
like
because,
outside of this?
Yeah, because what you're fed in Bikram yoga, this is the only way. And he has all, like, it's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
Literally, that's what he says. And he would call all other yoga Mickey Mouse shit. Yeah. And so you buy into this,
yeah,
right? And I'm like, okay, yes, he knows. And he is really someone who's literally, he would be on a platform, like raised up. We would all sit on the ground and he would be on a couch that had like this tiger situation on it. And we would all look up at him and, you know, and I was I was 21, you know? And so I think that obviously there was a time in my life where my life experience, perhaps, and I'm not saying all 21-year-olds are like this, but I wanted to really believe in something, you know, and I wanted to really buy into what he was saying. And obviously you have your own lived experience about how great you feel from this practice. And then this is where, you know, it's just interesting, like paying homage to the roots of yoga. Where does that draw a line? Because we couldn't say anything about him because he's done so much for the community.
Yeah.
Right? But where is there this damage and this harm? And where does one thing now outweigh the other?
Yeah, and it seems like people who are so strong on their opinion being the right one, it's to kind of mask that it's actually the opposite.
Totally.
And that they don't want you to, because I feel like if you're strong enough in position and your understanding of things, you are comfortable enough that you know that no matter what they do and where else they explore, they'll still see that yours is, if it really is.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, mine's the best, but don't check anywhere else.
Yeah,
you know?
totally. Just take my word for it.
Yeah.
Right? It's this blind faith.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously now having the perspective that I have, I'm at that point where I'm like, okay, if what you're saying really stands as strongly as you say it does, you should allow anyone and everyone to just peek in all the crevices.
Yeah,
you know, and be okay with that and actually embrace that as a necessary part of a higher purpose of evolving something to move forward to be better.
Yeah.
But he was like, this is it. This is the best that it's going to be. This is the best that this is ever going to be. And so I just bought into that, you know?
Yeah.
So I in my mind, I'm like, there's nothing else. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
I didn't even have, it's interesting you say that, because I didn't even have that consideration of, I could still do yoga, but it doesn't look like this. Like, that wasn't even on my radar in any way, shape, or form. I was so bought into the cult, you know?
And obviously, like, that's a very extreme version. And, so much around that. That's obviously, you know, a very extreme version of that. But it happens everywhere.
That's what I found.
Even with my teachers, they were like, no, our way is right. Everyone else is wrong.
Yeah.
And then I remember after the training, me and some of the other students going to other classes and being little yoga snobs, being like, oh, they don't know how to teach Warrior 2. They don't know, like, oh, they're so ignorant.
Yeah.
And, later realizing that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, watching my teachers do some really really nasty things, so it's such a common thing, and I think it's again, like, I'm so sorry to hear that you went through that, but like that fire that it's lit in you to really break that down, because it's happening on lots of micro scales. Even the conversation we had before the podcast about people, things that like are just slogans like cultural appropriation, which I'd love to chat to you about later, and just things that we regurgitate these terms to feel like we're fighting the good fight, and and doing the right thing and supporting this idea, yet not knowing what that actually means and where that's leading to. And I can see that in that experience where they're supporting the structure that they're a part of and they deeply believe in, and ignoring all the little cracks and all the little things because they're worried that's going to tumble down.
Totally.
Or it's uncomfortable to just even question it.
It is, because you also then have to question what your morals and your values are. If it's true, if I even entertain the possibility that it's true that someone who I look to is doing something that is against what I believe to be right or just, then I have to question myself, right? Like, people don't want to do that. And I had so many, friendships and connections that were severed because that was what I said. Like, we are all responsible for this continuing on because we're all allowing it to happen.
So what happened next?
So, I did my teacher training, and, I still wanted to, I was on staff for that teacher training, and I had that experience in Las Vegas. And then, I was actually moving to Australia at that time. And so came to Australia. I'd already lined up that I was going to teach for certain studios here. So, again, it was just one of those things that I was like, okay, if I want to move forward, I'm just going to have to reconcile this within, and because it's not being resolved without. And so, I didn't really resolve it. I just was pissed about it. And then I just kind of pushed that down. And then other things obviously brought that out of the woodwork. So some of those things were injuries, and then obviously when the first woman, Sarah Bond, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she came forward and she had a lawsuit against him, and she said, this is what happened, and I'm taking him to court, basically. So I testified for her and for a few other women as well, because then as soon as she came out, then everyone else is like, she's saying something, I'll say something. And I knew of her story and her situation, and I thought she's just exaggerating, And then when she finally came forward, then that gave me the confidence to speak up. And so the studios that I was teaching for in Brisbane, the Bikram studios, they said okay, we're going to have, a meeting about this, because it was they had all these students coming in saying, what the fuck? What is going on? Do you guys stand for this person? You have a picture of him on your wall and his name on your door. What's going on, And so, of course, they're going, oh, shit, our businesses are going to be compromised. We need to have a meeting about it. And that was the first time that I came forward and I said, this is true. This stuff is true. And I will tell you, I don't know if all the details are true, of course, but my sense and my feeling is, I had these experiences with him, so I can 100% see. I didn't experience what a lot of those women experienced, but I can see where I was being groomed and set up for that, and still very inappropriate stuff, right? And so we talked about it, and there was a lot of compassion in the meeting, but then what followed that was, you can't talk about this, because I was posting it on social media, And from the perspective of a business owner, I completely understand. I'm compromising their business. I'm compromising the foundations in which their business is built upon. And that's not okay. And I'm not aligning with the structure that would allow their business to continue to be successful. Of course, it makes sense to fire me, and to censor me. So I get that. But on a moral level, what are you truly standing up for? And so I just started to have all these things come up inside of me, those things that I was so pissed off about, that I had just done this. And I was like, you don't want me to fucking talk about it? I'm going to fucking talk about it. I'm going to post this and I'm going to post that, And then we had another meeting, and it was you can't do this, Jenelle. This is, students are coming in and asking about it. And I'm like, yeah, they should fucking ask about it, It's your choice to have his name same, yet I'm still the one that's like teaching the practice,
Yeah.
you know? So I'm still doing the very thing that, you know, is perpetuating, I guess, if you will, this man and his behavior,
Yeah.
but I'm feeling better about it because I'm saying something, you know?
Yeah.
So that was my kind of little process and my journey.
What do you think the ideal situation would have been? Because obviously she didn't react the way, like, she was obviously just, you know, kind of in protective mode.
Yeah.
What do you think might have facilitated, like, a better, like, attempt at a solution or something like that?
You mean from the studio owner? Is
Yeah,
that what
just
you
from the
mean?
whole
Yeah,
situation. Because
yeah.
that's the thing as well, like, because I think, you know, this story a lot of people can relate to in so
Yeah.
many different ways.
Totally.
But it's just like trying to figure out a way that it can be, because
Sure.
usually it is repress, and then it blows up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that does get stuff done. But that
mine?
can be really tricky as well.
Is that mine?
Yeah. I
Oh
think
my
it
God,
might
I'm
be your
so
alarm.
sorry.
No, that's all right.
I never have alarms on. I don't know why that's on. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's just an alarm. It's an important topic to talk about. So yeah, do you have any ideas of like what, you know,
Yeah.
because when you went in, did you have a solution that you had in mind that she didn't agree to? Or?
I think I was so, because I remember one of the teachers there was like a family that owned two of the studios. And so it was like the mom and then her two daughters and then their partner, one of the daughter's partner. And so it was like them and then me. And I remember the mom saying, "You're really angry about this." And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking angry. I was like, sometimes anger gets shit done, you know? Like, and I think that definitely anger is a necessary component of a healing process.
100%, yeah.
But when we stay in that, then it's like someone shooting you with an arrow and you decide to never take it out, but you just complain about it all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So I knew that there was going to be a point where I had to, my anger was going to soften, but that's where I was at that time.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have solutions personally other than like, why aren't you guys talking about this? But looking back on it, I feel one of the most honorable things that they could have done were to say, look, we know that this isn't okay. But what they said was, you don't know that this is true, right? And I'm like, but I just told you what happened.
Yeah.
So there was not a belief, right? Because they didn't want to believe.
Yeah.
And it was a male who was predominantly like at the helm of running the studio, then with his mother-in-law and you know, his partner and her sister. And so, but I could see that there was a lot of discomfort from the two daughters, because he was like that proponent. Like, he loved Bikram. He loved him. And he was very much like not willing to even entertain that this could be possible from someone that he looked up to.
Yeah.
And so he really just took the reins on that. And, you know, I feel like the honorable thing to do would have been to just own it. Just own. Like, I know that this could be very possible. But right now, where I'm at with my business is I'm not willing to sacrifice what I've created in order to acknowledge that this could be possible. Just don't stop acting like you are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just own it. If you're being an asshole, just say, I'm an asshole.
Yeah. And so just to get this understand as well, so anyone that tried to mediate with Bikram was pretty much just got like their
100%.
head lopped
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Public
Wow.
beheading. So everyone's scared.
Yeah.
Right? It's just fear mongering.
Yeah.
And so then you just try to make sure that you know, do the right thing, because that's in alignment with your best interest at that time, right?
Yeah.
It's like that instant thing, as opposed to maybe like a long-term look at, well, how does this actually align with my views? So it would have been nice to, you know, I guess if I was in that situation, I would hope that I would look at like what's really truly happening and like, look, I know that maybe this is wrong, but I'm just not willing at this point in time to make that decision to acknowledge it. And that's just where I'm at, you know, but there was not even an acknowledgement of that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I got fired from those studios / like also, you know, obviously the universe was like, you need to get the fuck out of Dodge. Like, you
Yeah.
need to leave, because this is just not okay. And as I said, there was injuries surfacing, and I was starting to ask questions. I was also starting at that point to do training to become a judge for the yoga competitions. So like I went to Melbourne and I did like a training there and everything like that. And I was asking questions about, because in the Bikram practice, there's this instruction of locking the knee. Anyways, this is just Bikram's words, but it essentially means your leg is straight, not like vertically straight, but as straight as you can make it, which means we will often be in a hyperextension.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was like, this just doesn't seem right. I started to ask questions like, how, like, this is not right. There was a lot of people getting injured. I was getting injured. People were asking questions, and it was just like, shut it down. Like, shut it down, shut it down. Let's just, throw water on all of these little flames that are sparking.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing for me, that I was like, I can't even ask questions.
Yeah.
You can't even have, curiosity. You can't have discernment. If it's out of alignment with what he is saying, then you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Well, you don't believe in the yoga. And this yoga has helped so many people,
Yeah.
And so I started to really see those things. And and I was like, no, I can't be a part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, because that's the thing as well. Like what I see with this kind of cult, I guess guru-ish mentality is a refusal to open a conversation. It's like, no, you're too low. You're like, I'm not going to like chat with the plebs.
Yeah.
Kind of vibe.
100%.
And because it sounds like a lot of this, like both the way that he's teaching yoga causing injuries, but obviously his behavior as well. Do you think there could have been, like, if he was open to communication, had some kind of mediation, you could all sit around and just be like, this actually isn't okay, like what is happening?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that, especially, I mean, this could happen in any industry, but I think the yoga industry especially prides itself on being, this open heart centered, and it's just something I see thrown around, even like, especially lately. I feel like the label of choice at the moment is heart centered.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a heart centered business. I'm a heart centered practitioner, and I know a lot of these people like are not having heart centered conversations with people. Like, I'm hearing that. They're talking about certain people, and when the other people want to chat with them in a heart-centered conversation, it's just a wall up.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And I think people are justifying this, because there's this big movement of protecting our peace, right? Like protecting our peace, and we don't have to deal with certain people. But again, it's all relative,
It is.
like we're throwing around these very black and white terms that people are using in ways that are causing harm. And I know it's a tricky balance to strike, to protect your own self from harm, but then it's are you then really perpetuating more harm for others? And I think that's leading to because there's so much I want to chat to you about, but also what I started to see as well is like you talking about the specific yoga poses that were harming your body. And how did you start to, like, did you end up being able to chat to other teachers, both about what happened with Bikram, but in the larger scheme of the system as well? Because that seems to be one thing that goes unquestioned, in that we think that these practices are passed down perfectly and that they're perfect in the way that they are, and nobody questions them. And this even came to what we'll talk about later, when people were saying, oh, the Yoga Sutras, you can't question them. And, people think it's all black and white. So, what was the next step of the journey towards you finding your own internal balance for it and then starting to share it with others?
Well, I mean, I started to teach for studios that were still like, they were like rogue Bikram studios.
Okay,
So I was still kind of like, I still want to do this thing, but I'll just do it at like a non-Bikram studio. And then that just opened the door for me to start to explore other styles. And then I eventually did a vinyasa teacher training course. And that felt really light, because it was not my initial perception of it was like, this is not dogmatic at all. There's so much freedom within this. And so I really enjoyed that fresh kind of experience and perspective. But as my curiosity was still very much like heightened, and as I was still going through my kind of processing of everything that had happened, I started to just see the same thing in vinyasa. And I was like, oh, same shit, different pile. It's it's the same. We're spouting these rules. We do have this dogma. It's not as extreme as Bikram yoga, but it's still very present. It's still very much there. And then meanwhile, there's the other women from other communities and men coming forward saying about things that have happened within the Ashtanga community, and none of these communities are really exempt from this kind of stuff that has been happening. So I really started to see also from, as you mentioned, the physical point that there is still so much rigidity within this practice that we're calling vinyasa, and at the end of the day, because I was starting to feel so aligned with what does it actually mean for us to be empowered in our practice? What does it actually mean for us to connect with ourselves personally, our personal needs, and then how does that interface with the rules of a practice? And that's where I really started to become curious about these things, and that's when I discovered Simon Borg-Olivier, and I was like, I need to go and do some stuff with him. So he did a 20-hour training, and I was just like, what the fuck? Everything was just oh my God. I mean, there was a real excitement, but also a death, because I was like, what the fuck have I been doing? I'm hurting people, And so, and I wanted to own that, because I think we can so easily not take ownership of some harm that we've done and of some damage that we've done, because, well, that's just the way that it was. I just did the best that I could. Yeah, of course, that goes without saying. But I wanted to acknowledge, wow, I did these things, I said these things, I hurt people because of what I was doing, And I was doing the best that I can with what I had, and that was my process. But I just wanted to acknowledge that, So I was teaching at, studios that allowed us to really play within that Bikram yoga sequence. And I just kind of went in and I was like, hey, you guys, we're just going to make some changes, And people loved it. And people were leaving class feeling more nourished instead of depleted, because within the Bikram practice, that is a big addiction, is you are addicted to the feeling of essentially being, they say, you've been hit by the yoga truck. That was literally an expression that people would say, you just felt like you got ran over. And that's why you're so just on cloud nine after you finish, because you're no longer in suffering. And your nervous system is just so shot. And
I guess similar thing to the ice bath and stuff as well.
Exactly, right? We become addicted to these very outward, external experiences that we're so thankful for, because our body's finally in a place of reprieve after the trauma. And so, and it's not to say that these things don't have benefit for people, right? But it's just to kind of
it's the balance of it and understanding, because again, so people often think that the modern yoga practice, like Hatha yoga and Ashtanga yoga, has always been around, but it's only a few hundred years old, and a lot of it comes from as they understood calisthenics back in India then, and also they were collaborating with Britain as well. But a lot of them were actually in the military. A lot of people that did the original Hatha practices. And Hatha actually means forceful. So we kind of have a different, because Sanskrit can be interpreted lots of different ways. So there is this sun moon, which everyone calls it. But it was actually, it meant forceful yoga practice, because it was mainly for men, and then also pubescent boys, to allow them to sit down and meditate and stuff. They had to wear themselves out, they had to be hit by the yoga truck to sit down and shut up and actually meditate.
There's a method to the madness.
But also they were training with the military and stuff as well, and so there's a lot of different things going on. And I love, because I haven't ever trained with Simon in person, but I've done some of his online stuff. But I followed him for a while, and I've seen him admit the way he used to do things. He's like, oh, I used to do this, but now I've figured out that this, and contradicting himself, but showing the humanness,
100%,
which I absolutely love. And you know, I've been lucky as well, like, because I've got a long-term martial arts background, and I've been lucky with my teachers. And my current kung fu teacher, he left the industry and just teaches in private because that's exactly what's happening. So he would find a gap in the system, something that actually doesn't work and it's not beneficial. And he went to his teachers and did the right thing. Actually, can I show you this? And then not even open to it. They kicked him out. Well, if you think that you're better, then, if you think that you know better than this lineage of teachings, you know, but I think when I think of lineage, I don't think of an unbroken, perfect practice. I think of a living, breathing organism that evolves. Yeah. And so I really look to people who are happy to contradict themselves and are happy to admit they're wrong and are always saying, you know, I could be wrong soon. And that's why I like a lot of the scholarly stuff as well, because they're saying, okay, well, currently we don't, this is what we've got so far, but tomorrow we could dig up or translate some scripture that completely contradicts everything we've said so far.
Yeah.
But no one in the yoga / spiritual industry is really admitting that or having that approach. It's more so, I just had a download and this is the perfect thing.
Yeah.
I know that all this scholarly evidence points to the contrary, but it's all lies, and I've got the real truth.
Yeah.
But it's the confidence and the charisma, and unfortunately, you know, even though we're rational beings, emotion always trumps rationality.
Yeah.
And so, if you're being emotionally manipulated, you'll completely wipe all the rational things to maintain that emotional connection, or like you said, kind of bypass all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, the logic just doesn't stand a chance against your conviction.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I found just to be really interesting, like in terms of just getting super curious about this. Like I'm like, like I like to ask a lot of questions, and I've always done that, but I realized through my experience as like, you know, in the Bikram world, that was really pushed down. And so, you know, after then I kind of stepped away from that and I started to ask more questions. And Simon was someone who was, you know, he was happy to have conversations about it. And he wasn't putting anything down. And this is one of the biggest things that I really like loved to learn from him was, you know, and he didn't say this, but this was he didn't say these words, but this was my kind of takeaway from it, was like, right and wrong really exist within the context of what one person wants to achieve.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and then that brings a whole other consideration into things like, obviously we do have like universal laws that are at play, and you will be supported in doing certain actions than others, whether that's right for you or wrong for you. But I guess on more of like a microscopic level per person, like he wasn't saying Bikram yoga is bad. He was like, it's this kind of practice that people are drawn to because of this. And it was just that. You know, and he wasn't smearing anything. And, you know, I know in my journey that's been a big thing for me that I've had to work through, is having like some hatred on things, you know, because I've realized that it's unresolved stuff for me that I have then, instead of feeling what that actually is, I have deflected that and distracted myself by putting hate on other things.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, a lot of this stuff about cultural appropriation, I feel like really comes into play, because people have so much pain.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to blame someone for that pain. You want to be able to push that onto someone, you know? And so I went through a lot of my processes. Like when I go back and I look at so many of my Instagram posts from like when I first started really posting about stuff like this, they were like, I was so mad, you know, but I realized that was a part of my journey, and, you know, there was a value to that at that time. But, you know, as I kind of resolved some of that anger, and I still have some zinginess about it, you know?
Yeah.
But as I've worked through resolving that, it's allowed me to open up my eyes more to just the curiosity element of things.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's when I was getting so curious about things. My husband was like, why don't you just open up a yoga studio and like stop talking to me about all the things that you know, that you want to explore, and just like open a studio and you can do what you want. And I was like, really? You know, should I do that? So that was kind of my reasoning. It was very, I guess, selfish, if you will.
Yeah.
But I also saw that there was a need for for people to like be more supported in their individuality, for yoga to be more accessible, for it to be more inclusive, for it to be more about longevity and sustainability, not about this like short-term gain. And yeah, so that's really what my driving force was behind opening a studio.
Yeah, well, it's a whole different game. It's a whole different opportunity to, and it must have been really like eye-opening for you, because if you separate yourself from all these rules of I'm in this studio, I have to teach a certain way, and now you can do whatever you want. Is sitting with that, like, okay, well, I can do anything. What do I actually want to do? Like, what do I personally? So, what did you find were your what was that process like to sit down and be like, wow, this like open-ended now. Like, what do I actually do? And
well, that was not the first time that I didn't teach Bikram yoga, because I had been teaching other practices, but the opening of my studio was the end. I'd never taught Bikram yoga again. I never even practiced Bikram yoga again since I opened my studio. And that was in 2018. And so it was me utilizing what I had learned from Simon, which what really lit me up was the idea of like antagonistic muscle pairs. And I was like, oh, wow, like we're doing so much forcing of flexibility, and it's actually not really in alignment with the body's biomechanics. How can we invite the body into asana instead of force the body into asana? And that really has been like my whole premise for the last, since I opened up my studio, and since I then closed that and took everything online, is like, how can we be, like, from a physical standpoint, how can we be more invitational? Because to force, no one likes to be forced to do anything. So do you think your physical body actually is appreciating that? Do you think it's going, yes, just I surrender to the way that you are forcing this hamstring to stretch right now? No, it has protective mechanism for a reason, right? So I really got curious about these types of things and about the biomechanics, and saw like where, practices were actually not very sustainable. And then why were we continuing to teach that? But sex sells, right? People like this instant gratification of the feeling of the stretch. Or, what they think yoga should look like. And this is the thing that I talk to yoga teachers about all the time, is like the biggest struggle they have is changing the perception of what their students have when it comes to what they think yoga should be. That's the biggest thing.
And like you said, rather than being invited to explore their own bodies, they're told you should be able to do this, and if you can't do this, this is your issue, not the system's issue.
Exactly. And so this is your modification that you can do.
Exactly. If you really need to do that modification, then like, I'll let you do it. But there just doesn't seem to be room for the system to be adjusted. It's always the person's fault. And I see so many people that, like, even in power yoga, like, again, there's nothing wrong with power yoga as a whole, but when people are just doing chaturanga, or these certain poses again and again and again, and they get the repetitive strain injuries. What I often see when I see those students, they don't say, oh, like, it's because I've been doing this. They think there's something wrong with them.
Totally.
And then they need to come do more yoga. So they hurt themselves again. And they can't fathom that the teacher might be a little bit negligent.
100%.
Or a lot negligent.
And the teacher can't fathom that they would be negligent, because I think our hearts are in the right place. And that's the kind of crux of this, right? Is that, like, no one becomes a teacher to hurt someone.
Exactly, yeah.
That's just not. But when we don't start discerning and being curious and asking questions and peeling back the layers and undoing things, then we essentially do become complicit in the harm that is being done. So there's a point, like, I get it. Like, as a, new yoga teacher, you're like, I'm just doing the best I can to, like, get people through these poses and, like, not freak out, and just try to make this as, like, enjoyable for people as possible. I get that. But there's a certain point, even that is debatable, right? But there's a certain point in your teaching that I just think, again, it comes back for me to the responsibility. Right? Like, if you're going to lead people through a class that's 80 to 90% physical movement, you should probably become a little bit more experienced and versed in understanding how that movement might be actually affecting their bodies.
Yeah.
You know, but then we get this whole thing like, oh, yoga's not about the poses. And then people are going and teaching like 80 to 90% of poses in their class.
Yeah.
So there's just the intention and then the action, they're not aligning.
Yeah.
Right? This is what I say I'm about. This is what I'm doing. This is not happening. It's, they're just bypassing each other.
Yeah.
You know, do you feel that?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. It's coming back to like people just say these slogans.
Yeah.
It's just like, yoga's more than movement, but we're just going to move the whole time, and
Yeah.
we're not really going to get anything else out of the class. No more invitations to see what the mind's doing. No more
Yeah.
invitations of this.
Yeah.
And so, like, again, they mean well, and a lot of people don't realize that this is happening. And I think it's just trying to, because I've noticed this as well. Like, I obviously still have my blind spots. And this actually showed up in the last teacher training that I ran, where I always try to invite my students to question what I'm saying. So I'm like, please, and I know it's difficult for them, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be that person. So I try to set up opportunities to do
Nice,
that.
yeah.
And I had a great question from one of the students at the last training, and who actually pointed out a blind spot of mine that I've been teaching a cue of a certain pose in a certain way that wasn't actually what I was demonstrating. And so because I've been teaching so much, and I think mainly teaching in the teacher training realms and things, people don't question me enough. And so I actually found a flaw that what I was saying for the cue wasn't what I was demonstrating, but I thought I was.
Yeah, right.
And so, you know, even after many years of teaching, like I still have all these blind spots.
Yeah.
And my student was able to show me that and correct it and unpack it.
Yeah.
And that was a really good example to show it as well.
Totally.
And I think that's what I've really tried to create opportunities to open up conversations because, you know, it's like this whole shadow idea, right? Like people's always chasing their shadows, but there's always a shadow.
Yeah.
So wherever you're shining the light,
Yeah.
you know, it creates a shadow.
A shadow somewhere else.
You
Yeah,
know,
totally.
and so like I'd love to know your like personal practice as well, because so many yoga teachers I see kind of bounce from focusing straight like initially on asana and pose and physics practice, and then you pendulum swing, be like, no, I got to go into the meditation, all the other stuff and the philosophy, and they don't want to teach asana, but then they kind of pendulum swing back again. And it's this kind of exploration of all the different aspects and trying to find that middle ground of it. So
I think for me, what I've really become passionate about is, you know, how can we make asana about the essence of yoga? Right? How can we encourage our students to practice, whether it's a student who's a teacher that's training under you or a student who's just practicing? How can we encourage our students to approach their practice in a way through the lens of asana that fosters empowerment, that fosters personal connection, right? Because it's all about, well, why do we do yoga? For connection.
Yeah, because I was about to say, what's your personal essence of yoga? Because that's another whole, really important question as well.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's always changing. And for a while, I felt, I guess, less than or inferior because I felt quite connected to the physical side. And then I was told, like, that's not enough, you know, like you're focusing on something that isn't, nobody directly said that to me, but that's what I'm seeing. You know, you're focusing on something that doesn't really matter as much. That's not what it's about, right? But now seeing my journey, I realize that one of my gifts and one of my passions that I can see right now is really about how to utilize the tool of asana to help people become more empowered and more connected to themselves. So people are making decisions constantly on their mat and in their lives. So if we can support people in the decision-making process, because what I've realized is that people just want to perform and conform. This is what society praises.
Yeah.
You fit in, you don't ruffle feathers, and you just do what everyone else is doing for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of choices I've made in my life and within my family, like I've been very much the black sheep for. And so I have taken that perspective as well, and I've seen how that plays out in the room all the time. People want to show up, they want to fit in. They don't want to ruffle feathers. They want to just be in the same type of kind of way of being that everyone else is, because their conditioning from society tells them that they need to be that. And what I see that this comes from is a herd mentality pack. But the difference between a true herd mentality, pack mentality, where you do what the pack is doing and you do what the leader tells you to do, and that And what we're doing on the mat is that one is not about survival. Right? Like you're not there on your mat to survive a life-threatening situation. So you don't need to take everything that the teacher says at face value. It's okay if you do something totally different than what everyone else is doing beside you, but people are so scared to stand out because of this conditioned psychology, you know? And so I've done a lot of things in my life that I've stood out and that I've been ridiculed for and that I've been called, you know, it's like, I get that. And so seeing that and having that experience has really greatly informed what I'm seeing happening in the yoga room. Yeah. So that's really where my passion sits right now is like, you know, I guess just in a nutshell, how can we utilize the tool of asana to help our students discern what is truly right for them? Yeah. That's what I love.
Yeah,
right
I completely agree because there's so many different definitions of yoga and like depending on what your branch of yoga that you've kind of been initiated into, like you're going to have a probably different answer, but something I find across the board is both empowerment, so the power to be able to make more choices, so essentially liberation of freedom, right? Yeah. It's like, cool, I have I've strengthened my body so I can do more with my body. You know, I have more space around my mind and my thoughts and my emotions so I don't have to respond instinctually or under survival to these, and I have more choice in the world. But at the same time, you know, some people focus on that outward empowerment, but if they don't know how to discern, like you were saying, that's not really going to do them any well. They're still going to make more detrimental decisions. They're just going to do it more effectively. You know, they're just going to make...
they're going to get better at it.
Get better at making bad decisions. More empowered to make the decisions that are causing them more harm, which will lead to, discernment is something that I don't really see people talking about as much. We kind of do, we say like wisdom or something, but like what actually is the wisdom? And I think it's what you were saying is like, stripping back the layers of this conditioning that we realize that actually, you know, our parents were trying to do their best in what they taught us, but they might not have known, you know, what was ideal. They just did their best. And also our teachers in school and also our friends and other teachers and all that sort of stuff, and stripping that back and actually being like, okay, everyone's human, everyone is making mistakes. And so how can I start to discern what to listen to and who to listen to? Totally. And everyone has a different answer for that. But I think both of us are kind of on that idea that, like, if the person that we're learning from is willing to be questioned, they're obviously willing to grow and willing to evolve. And that's the kind of person that I want to
Totally. And I remember like listening to someone in a podcast, totally not yoga related, the podcast, but he said, I'm invested in the truth, not in being right. And I was like, yes, for sure. Like more of us, I feel like would benefit from that. But then with that comes a sense of responsibility. You have to be willing to take responsibility. And I mean, fuck, there's so many things in my life that I'm still like, I don't want to see that. I know I've done that, or I know I've said that. And, you know, like my kids are showing me that all the time. Like that, you know, they're the most confronting kind of, you know, experiences that you can have. But I just think that if we're more invested in what is true, as opposed to, and hearing other people, right? As opposed to trying to convince others that we're right and not showing up as though we're wrong, right? Like we had spoken about before we started recording, like not wanting to show people that we might be mistaken, you know, or like, I know what I know now, but, you know, I also thought like a year ago that I was like, oh, I know so much. And now I'm like, oh, no, I didn't really know much then. Now I know a lot more. And then the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly. And having maybe like, because what I try to do, because obviously in social media, we're just bombarded with all this information and most of it's nonsense. And so when I hear something, I think like, most people, when they see something, instantly like, oh, wow, did you know about this? But what I've been trying to do is when I see something, and especially when it confirms what I already think, try to just do like even just one little Google search and something to get a different opinion on it. And especially if the people are really loud and confident about their decision as well. But it's so tricky, like what we were talking about before the podcast as well, is that you have to be loud and often polarizing to get people to engage. And that's the issue. Like if, you know, people are kind of a bit more non-dual, and they're like, I can see this perspective, and I
Yeah.
can see this perspective,
Yeah.
and kind of they're right on this side, and they're right on this side.
Yeah.
So not only is that not like exciting, so it
Yeah.
doesn't get anywhere near
Yeah,
engaging,
totally.
but most of the people, when they realize that, well, there's nothing really to talk about.
Totally.
You know, and
Yeah.
so they don't even go on.
Yeah.
So the people that think they know and think that they've got the truth, and they're super loud and
Yeah.
super... And I even know, like, when I see someone really loud, really has so much conviction, it's kind of, a part of me, like, knows that they're maybe pretty new to this, or they
Yeah.
haven't really done their research or something. They're just regurgitating information.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah.
they feel so confident.
Yeah.
But there is another part of me that can't help but be captivated by their confidence and
Yeah.
their charisma that's bypassing all of that logic in
Yeah,
me
yeah.
and being even though I know logically, no, like, I know this is actually
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
There's like this part of me that's like, oh, but maybe.
You're compelled.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly.
Yeah, you're sold, right?
Yeah.
Like, we are all salespeople,
Yeah.
right? In a sense, whether it's just this conversation or it's a podcast or it's, like you're actually teaching a student, like we're all salespeople for, I guess, our beliefs
Yeah.
and then for yoga, obviously, as that's the topic. But it is so interesting to just look at it from that perspective. And I love what you said about like someone who can see both sides. You're like, okay, well, like there's not really too much to get worked up about here,
Yeah.
right? And then you're kind of just, I guess, moving on or expanding some of your awareness, and going, oh, that bit of information feels useful for me to know about.
Yeah.
But you're not getting your panties in a knot about the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, there's going to be things that trigger you. Like, as I said prior, I think that our fire that gets lit and like a bit of anger and a bit of feistiness that we have is a part of the process to creating a change, right? Just like something in nature, like there has to be a burst.
Yeah.
There has to be something that creates the change.
Yeah.
But then that can't always be the frequency in which we operate.
Yeah, and I'd love if more people would default to like asking questions rather than make statements. Like, even like if we could talk about some of your posts recently, because
Yeah.
it's like when if you say something rather than say no, you're wrong, or I hate you for saying
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the one that you put up recently, not falling for the propaganda and all the list, and the one that was triggering people was the cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
And rather than, because that's such a broad topic,
So broad.
it's like it could have just been, what do you mean by this?
Yeah.
But no one really, like, I mean, admittedly, people are saying that they're doing this to help, but they don't really want to know.
No.
Like, they don't want to have the conversation. They just want to exert some anger and frustration.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's intoxicating. And
Yeah,
it feels good
yeah.
to do that.
For sure. And it's
Yeah.
easy to do that behind the keyboard.
Yeah.
Behind the
100%.
screen, right? I mean, there's that term keyboard warrior for a reason. And,
Yeah.
and you get a confidence and you get that kind of hero mentality. And I get that. And again, I do think like all of these different aspects are needed at certain points,
Yeah.
right? Like certain phases of a journey or a process of something coming to be. Like, I do think that some of these things are needed, right? Like a bit of anger or a bit of loudmouth or whatever that is, right? But if something remains within that kind of realm, then that's when we have the stagnation and then we have the division, right? And I guess I like to look at where, particularly with this whole thing that got a lot of hype around me saying like I'm not falling for the propaganda of cultural appropriation when it comes to teaching yoga and whitewashing yoga. And for me, it's like really getting to the heart of the matter, which is what is the deeper intention? Is the deeper intention to sit in the pain body and to blame and to just constantly rehash what has been perhaps, right? Or what currently is. I get that. I'm not disputing people's pain and suffering. Or is the intention to resolve, to heal, to move forward? And that's where I feel like the intention for a lot of people that got quite upset about my post, they're still in so much of that pain. And so
Yeah.
they're just, that's not where they're at, is to move forward.
Yeah, and I
You
think
know?
two main issues is we don't actually break down what we're trying to achieve here. It's
Yeah.
like they're loving the issue.
Yeah,
And like they're loving
totally.
the charge of the issue
Yeah.
and yelling about the issue.
Yeah.
But when you say, okay, cool, how can we break this down and what
Yeah.
do we actually want to achieve here and how can we achieve it? It's like no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
But also people only being exposed to little pockets of information.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, okay, cool, if we break it down, and so culture now, we can't help but culture is not necessarily associated purely with race anymore,
Yeah.
right? So culture evolves out of particular areas of people that are just one particular race initially, and then that expands to other people.
Yeah.
And so we're taking culture now is becoming separate to race.
Mm-hmm.
Like we would all agree that all cultures are being mixed together.
Yeah, it's
and
a
so,
melting pot.
Yeah, and so it's like, okay, well, what actually is the culture? And then we have to break down what aspects of the culture. And usually what we end up with is a respect for the original intent and the techniques of a modality and trying to stick within the original means of that. Okay, let's go with yoga, right? And so we look back at the original branches of yoga and we see there's actually lots of different intentions and lots of different methods. And so, okay, you want to talk about, what they were originally doing and what people are doing now, but which one are you wanting to talk about?
Yeah, yeah.
And also the weird things that happen, like, I won't get too much into it, but, when Britain was colonizing India, they ended up repressing a lot of it there, and a lot of certain branches of yoga were seen as bad. And so India focused on other branches which were seen as more clean and even more in line with Christianity at the time.
More presentable.
Like the Yoga Sutras.
Yeah.
And so at the time, Tantra was flourishing, and the Yoga Sutras hadn't been touched really in like 800 years around this time, because yoga has expanded past them and saw it more as dualistic. And some of the original sutras were talking about seeing the body as disgusting and putrid and like losing all love for your body, because their goal was to escape the body and never come back.
Yeah, wow.
And so there was two main branches of yoga: renunciate yoga, and then there was tantric yoga. So tantric yoga was world embracing. It was for householders, people with families, and they saw the world as divine, right? And then renunciate yoga was, this place is shit, and we want to make sure we disconnect from it completely. And then hence all the things about not doing bad in the world, because it wasn't necessarily doing good for the sake of doing good. It was doing good, or avoiding doing bad, to avoid all the attachment of the karma that was associated with that, and then so they can escape the world and not have to come back.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and so it's actually having these conversations about what were the original intentions, because what we get is little pockets of information that are translations of translations of translations, and we don't understand what the actual goal was.
Yeah.
And so I think before we can blame anyone for something like cultural appropriation, be like, cool, what are we actually trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
And why do we think they're appropriating it? Is it because someone else told you? And
someone told you to care about it, and so you started caring, but you don't actually know why.
Yeah. And to me, like, that kind of conversation, or lack of conversation, halts any progress
100%
in this. And if people are really caring about the culture and the modality and the technology and everything around it, then let's have conversations. I love talking about this.
Yeah.
But it seems to be like no one wants to touch it.
No.
And I know the irony of like a cis white male talking about this stuff, but like I also have done my research.
Yeah.
And really it's a conversation I think more of us should have, and I'm open to lots of these conversations as long as they're at least broken down rationally and not charged with emotion. Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's exactly what you said, like in a nutshell, is we've become so focused on the not the essence, right? And like the original intention, right? Like the original intention to me, it can be maintained and it can be presented and it can be utilized in so many different ways.
Yeah.
But then people are attaching to, well, no, that's not aligning with that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much gray area within that type of like perspective.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get people pointing the finger, which creates division. And anytime we're divided, we're easier to manipulate and control. And so then something that perhaps once was or currently is an important topic to consider and to go, yeah, like these people did a bad thing and it's not okay, right? But when do we move forward from that, and how do we move forward from that, and what is holding us in that place of pain?
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I think it's as you said, it's so important to have those kinds of conversations because it's about the solution, it becomes solution oriented.
Yeah.
But when we throw these labels around, it's not solution oriented, you know? And the other thing that I feel as well is like even this idea of, you know, what's traditional yoga versus what's not. And I've spoken about that, and I've gotten a lot of flack for that as well. But the thing is that as you've been explaining, what yoga originally was is nothing. Even I mean, you would know how many hundreds of years back that people might be thinking that's where we, you know, say that's traditional yoga. And then someone else is going to go, oh no, that's not traditional. We'll go even further back and that's traditional. Like, it's just a natural process of evolution in order for the essence of something to continue to be applied to the people.
Yeah, and it completely depended on what your goals were.
Totally.
That's the thing, you're going to use different tools for different goals.
Yeah.
And if people were enjoying having a family and having a job and living and they just wanted to integrate spirituality, they'd have very different tools and goals and a whole different practice and tradition, a whole different tradition to the people. But you also need to understand like how ideas evolve out of the environment that they're in as well.
Yeah.
And because, you know, when the agriculture industry started and classic yoga was prominent, people were getting sick, they were living in poverty, and yoga evolved. Most of these things evolve and not necessarily out of the people up the top.
Right,
they're chill.
The problem.
Yeah, from the problem. And so if you look back at how they were living, it's no wonder that they wanted to escape and they saw reality as punishment.
Yeah, because it was for them.
Yeah, they were living in poverty, they were sick, there was disease, they were, you know, treated really badly. And so for them, the idea of never coming back to this, sweet, that sounds like a great goal. I will do anything I can. Yeah, but people, you know, eventually when that changed and you know, Tantra especially, like people don't realize that originally women couldn't practice yoga. I mean, there was very, very sparse women, but they were usually kept hidden when they were practicing. And Tantra put everyone on the level playing field. And so Tantra said, yeah, women can practice, women can be gurus. In fact, peasants are equal to kings, you know, and put everyone on the level playing field. And so Tantra was also, actually the body is a beautiful thing and it's part of the divine. And so that's where we get like Hatha practices and starting to focus on the body. But at the same time, there was this confusion when Hatha was starting to get popularized, but then they were those who were trying to like propagate it and promote it were avoiding Tantra because the West, so Britain and everything, it was highly Christianized, saw Tantra as like black magic and dark and putrid and horrible.
Yeah.
And so they started taking these Hatha or these tantric body practices, mix it with gymnastics and calisthenics, and then they took the Yoga Sutra practices because they were very wholesome and very in line with Christianity and put it together, and this is what we get. And this,
would you say that is what many people's idea of traditional yoga is?
Yeah, exactly.
See? And that's,
and like I'm continually learning. Like I'm continually finding new information that might contradict. You know, and you know what I say. Like this is what I currently know, but I might find information that contradicts. And if anyone has contradicting information, share the source that you got. You know, don't just say your friend told you, but. As well, like it just circles all the way back to, you know, people like I learned to do Yoga Sutras, and the fact that we call them the Yoga Sutras, it's like, cool, I'm learning yoga, I have these physical poses that have been around for a long, long time, not 100 years or so, and then the Yoga Sutras that are the text of yoga, but that actually are completely contradictory to how we're learning yoga as a householder. And that also, if you look at the Yoga Sutras, where are all these ideas? Not, like, you've got pranayama and maybe a couple of meditation practices, but where's all the other stuff? And it's not there. And there's this, like, cognitive dissonance. Just like, no, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense because someone told me that this is 100%. The way to do things.
And I trusted them because maybe they were from the source. Or we've been led to believe that if they tick certain boxes, right? Like it's like, oh, where did you do your teacher training? India. Okay, well it's all good then. Everything's like the way it should be. Yeah.
And India's confused because the thing is, well, when they got very westernized, they were playing to because there's a quote that Christopher Wallace talks about in a lecture of the history of it, is that the oppressed are always wanting to impress the oppressor.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so
that's the conditioned psychology.
Completely circles back to the
Yeah.
initial thing that you were
Yeah.
talking about, that they were, you and the other students were being oppressed,
Yeah.
but there's some sort of weird psychological things happen that even though you're being oppressed, all you want is validation from your oppressor.
Totally.
And so India was trying to impress the West, and so they started changing everything, and then the West approved, and then it moved to the West, and now India is still teaching this westernized version of yoga. Like the 7-chakra rainbow system has only got invented like 50 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so much evidence to
Yeah.
say, scholars like, no, actually the first time the 7-chakra rainbow system showed up was like in 1957. Before that didn't exist.
Right.
Yeah, and India's teaching that. So
Yeah.
just like you said, people are going back to India,
Yeah.
and because they're doing it in India, they think
Yeah.
they're learning a traditional practice.
True. Yeah.
And so it's just, having conversations like this, to be like, we're all just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, trying to unpack and reveal more and more information. And there's probably so much that is not even accessible for you to learn about. You know, like you only know what has been recorded and what has actually been, written down and captured.
Yeah.
And I mean, I heard this quote that it was like, history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're like,
100%, yeah.
okay, even that, you just have to have some discernment around still, right? Like most things I think are going to be presented with a bias, particularly because, when you come back to, let's say, like this overarching desire to have some control over humanity. And I truly believe, and I'm sure, it sounds like you're really switched on to this stuff too, that like we have so much fucking potential that we do not even know about. And a lot of that is is needing to be squashed because we are in a system where we operate via, an upper hand controlling us. We're just puppeteered. So if we are in our power and we realize these things about ourselves and we have questions and we're allowed to be curious and be discerning, that means we are more powerful, we are more connected, and that's threatening to the system that we live in.
Oh, 100%. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it's but again, like questioning it, and like an example is that I was reading about recently. So Hinduism, as we know it, is only a modern invention because it's all different folk traditions, right? So, people even, a few hundred kilometers away would have completely different deities and stuff like that. And so what's happened is they've lumped everything under Hinduism, right?
Okay.
And so Hinduism has become this political thing. So India is under a Hindu government, which is great to see. But what's happening is they're trying to say that it has always been a certain way and using that as a political statement to say that this is like our politics are in line with our religion, but certain things are being glazed over in the caste system. So they're wanting to keep the caste system, for example. And it may not sound much, but there's some pretty horrible stuff that goes on within that. And to justify that, they look at the idea of karma. And so if you believe in karma, then you should believe that you might end up as a peasant as a punishment, and it's excusing mistreatment of certain demographics.
Yeah, totally.
And like that's way bigger topic that I can even fathom. It's not something that I want to but it's just understanding that everything is going to be, a little bit unbalanced in certain ways. It's like this is great, but this is a shadow aspect of it. This is great, but this is a shadow aspect.
Totally.
And I think just having some softness around ideas.
Yeah.
And rather than grabbing and holding onto it, saying this is perfect.
Yeah.
It's be like, okay, cool, but it's also causing some issues in other ways as well.
Yeah, and that's the part that I think is so important for us to just really pan out and look at, like what's really causing harm.
Yeah.
Right? Not like someone once told me this idea of this person that could potentially possibly cause some harm maybe to someone, and you're doing that thing, right? Like it's just so unclear, as opposed to like, let's really look at this to see what is truly causing harm. And that's a big thing that I think, like this term whitewashing yoga, it is a harmful term. I mean, what if we said blackwashing yoga or brownwashing yoga? Like it would just not stand.
Yeah.
Like, and there might be people even hearing me say that are like literally cringing in their skin because we're not allowed to say stuff like that. But here we are, we're allowed to, and it's supported
Yeah.
to say things like whitewashing.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was interesting going back to that post that I'd done, and there were actually a few Indian women that commented on that saying, this is not just people who are white that are doing this. There are a lot of people of different ethnicities, Indians included, that are doing what you're saying is cultural appropriation or whitewashing yoga, you know? So I just think, again, it goes back to like, what are the solutions, right?
Yeah.
What are the solutions? What are the intentions? And what's truly doing harm versus what is something that you're being told is harmful,
Yeah.
you know? And then you just latch on to that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I've got a big respect for the technology and the modalities around things and trying to do that justice and see what, like, the original creators of this modality or this technology or this art form or this craft, whatever you want to call it, what were they originally trying to do with this? And how can I really try to follow suit with that
100%,
and bring it. And it is tricky to take certain things. I think it is important to dive into the religious aspects of where the modalities came from because they kind of go hand in hand. And
I would love for you to talk more about that, actually.
yeah, well, at the same time, like, there's a lot of evidence to show that a lot of the yogis were actually what we would consider atheists as well. And so we think that everyone's Hindu, but again, that's just a modern glaze over of things. And they had different beliefs about different concepts. And that's what's kind of happening at the moment with this unchangingness that they're trying to create of Hinduism, saying that it's always been the same. But like scholars are like, no, there's so many different versions. And then they're trying to hold on to one particular aspect, but it's causing harm because of just one aspect is the karma aspect. And so what certain people are trying to say is like, actually, no, these different branches of yoga have viewed karma as not that like connected to the caste thing. That's just something you're trying to keep politically. And so there's again exactly the whole theme of this has been a refusal to have an open conversation about it and saying that something is perfect and unchanging where every piece of evidence is pointing to the contrary and just ignoring that. And because they have power and because they have the say and because they have conviction, everyone's just going along with it. And you know, people do it until eventually people just stop crying out about it or forget about it, hopefully. And changing the narrative around it. And so is there anything in particular you want to know just about the...
Well, because, you know, since I have been sharing more of these kinds of curiosities and perspectives and, you know, I guess you might say like some polarizing perspectives or things to ponder, it feels very much like a religion. Like people are just jumping on other people. And so as I shared with you prior to the podcast, like I used to say namaste when I taught. And it never felt something for me that was like I was really connected to. I knew I was just doing it because everybody else was saying it. And then I had the opportunity to go and I was teaching yoga in India. I was teaching Bikram yoga in India for about 6 months. And the family that I was really close to, they would not say namaste. Everyone on the street was like, namaste, namaste. Like everyone on the street was saying that. And then they would not say that. And I said, oh, why don't you guys say that? And they said something else. And they said, well, we're not Hindu, we're Muslim. So we have another greeting. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like a greeting that is synonymous with a particular religion. I don't feel that aligns with what I want to present in my yoga classes. So I just stopped saying it. And so I guess it would be nice for you to elaborate a little bit on, I guess, like, this is what I've been thinking. I'm like, is yoga just a religion? Like, that's what it's feeling like? And then I'm having now different perspectives on how I feel about that and what that means. And so I'd love for you to just, you know, elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think, like, you know, even just giving people tools of, like, how would we look into that ourselves. And so, like, for me, my go-to is trying to find, like, scholarly sources or just, like, try to find sources that have been researched and peer-reviewed by other people. And, like, ChatGPT is a horrible place to go to for that kind of thing. But you can actually train it to give you the sources. And so that's actually like a really great... So I've trained ChatGPT when I ask it a question, I tell it to give me the sources. And so I was like, okay, ChatGPT, what was this? And it'll still spit out nonsense all the time. Like, okay, show me the source for that. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I can't find the source for that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And and so that's just like a really good example of people talk about AI being so bad, but it's just a reflection of us.
Totally, yeah.
And so it's the same thing. It's like I'll ask someone, or someone will ask me. Like, I still do this. It's good to have people around you that question you. So someone might ask me a question, and I'll respond, and they'll be like, "Oh, how do you know that? That's actually a great question."
Yeah.
Someone told me that when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and now I've just been repeating it without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And so,
especially in an age where information is so available.
yeah.
Right? It feels nice to just be like, I didn't have to look this up in a book.
Yeah.
But I sound really smart.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple of good sources. So my main teacher these days is Christopher Wallace. So he's a Sanskrit scholar. So he's been in the culture for a long, long time. And yeah, he can translate the text himself. So he's got a lot of good information on it. But there's been a book published by Jim Mallinson recently, who's also a Sanskrit scholar, and it's super dry and super it's really difficult to get through, but that's a really good resource for that. But basically, to answer that question, so there's a lot of evidence that based on what these yogis in the past had talked about, that they saw the end result differently. Some believed in reincarnation, some believed in certain aspects that were similar to Christianity, some believed that there was nothing really waiting for us. And so it's hard because we say, okay, well, that was Hindu, that was Christian, that was atheist, but they didn't have those terms back then. And so we have a tendency to just put things in boxes that are similar or familiar to us because it makes us feel comfortable. It's like, oh yeah, I can categorize
I get it.
that.
Yeah.
And so it's a very difficult conversation to have. Even in the branch of Hindu, there's so many different folk traditions.
Okay.
But there's lots of evidence that some of the yogis were what we would consider atheists in the way that they didn't necessarily believe in a deity being an objective reality, but more so like a kind of expression of our own consciousness and kind of ideas. It's a huge conversation to have. Yeah.
So interesting.
But yeah, it is tricky to separate from us from the religion to the actual culture and the practices. But that's why I think I've researched enough to understand that I can use yoga as a technology to even mix with other ideas, because there's a Muslim yoga as well. Like a lot of the Sikhs practice yoga. So some branches of Islam won't touch yoga.
Right.
But there's certain branches of Islam that are unified with yoga now. Same with Christianity. A lot of Christianity says that yoga is the devil, but there's actually branches of Christianity that say yoga helps to connect them closer to God and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that we see one small pocket. And again, just circling back to this whole conversation, we're only exposed to a small pocket of information, and we feel confident in that because we haven't seen how many things can contradict it.
Yeah.
And so I really urge everyone to just expand your horizons, to like go to if you're only been in one style of yoga, go to other teachers, go look for people that contradict what you're saying, have people around you that question you. But yeah, what's your kind of feedback on that? Like, because you're, I guess, on a journey now to try to encourage people to do more of that by the looks of it, really trying to question things and open up conversations. And so what are your tools for doing that? And like, what would you recommend that other people can do to help to maintain that spark of curiosity? And try to avoid all this shit from happening over
all
again.
the dogma. I mean, I think it's really great to, as you said, like I just, we'll parrot that, to just look at the inverse of things, right? And see where this information is coming from, and really like ask yourself, is this mine? Like, are these my thoughts, my feelings, or are they ones that are being like imposed upon me? And then where might they be coming from, I think like because I have become so passionate about how to utilize asana as a tool for all of this type of stuff that we're talking about, the discernment and the curiosity and everything like that. For me, I guess if it's someone who practices yoga and they're listening to this, I would say, don't be scared to ask questions or stand out in a practice. Like, who are you practicing for? It's your time, it's your money, right? And those are the two most, what people typically perceive are like the two most scarce things And here you are putting time and money onto a practice on your mat, just conforming and performing to do what you think you should be doing instead of discovering what is actually going to be working for you.
Yeah.
So, you know, from that perspective, like, really, I would say to just start looking at where am I showing up in my life, where I'm performing and I'm trying to fit into something versus actually connecting in with, like, do I really need that? Do I really want that? Like, even asking ourselves these questions, and this is coming to, you know, a recommendation for yoga teachers as well. So many yoga teachers spout this phrase, listen to your body, listen to your body, listen to your body, but they're not giving any tangible kind of tools on how to actually do that. And when we look at where most people are at in society, it is, I'm so disconnected. Like, even if there's something that comes up and I hear it, I don't even know how to respond to it. I'll just shut it down, right? So, like, what does it mean to actually connect? What does it mean to actually listen to yourself? You know, from a teacher, as a perspective as a yoga teacher, what does it actually mean to support your students in listening to their bodies? You know, and I think that if you practice yoga and if you teach yoga, on some level you resonate with the physical practice, right? So how can you utilize that more and make that more about the essence of yoga? By questioning, by exploring, by experimenting, by discovering. Like, where is there, you know, territory that you want to explore, that you're scared to go to that space because maybe it's uncharted by others around you, and you're like, I don't want to go there alone. Guarantee there's heaps of people out there that want to go there with you, but they're all scared.
100%.
So connect with people who want to also be curious and that have the investment in the, what I feel is the greater purpose of carrying on yoga, which is, as you said, like the essence and the intention, rather than trying to get caught up in the semantics of like what that actually needs to be. Right? And there's so much of the expression of yoga that we haven't even uncovered yet, right? Like, how might that be expressed in other ways? And for me right now, it's just really about looking at, like, how can we utilize what most people are teaching, which is, you know, as I said, 80 to 90% asana. Let's use that in a way to actually fulfill and carry out and practice what the essence of yoga is about for people.
Yeah. So what's a tool that you recommend for other people and also works for yourself, that, like, how to listen to your body and what that means? Because that's a huge subject as well, because I think there's, like, different parts of us, you know, like you were talking about, the loudest often is our survival body, or, you know, the part of us that is just wanting to survive and wanting to stick with what's familiar and to be safe. And, you know, what other parts are there, and, like, how do we start to communicate with them?
I think, like, I always kind of look at this from, I guess, two different perspectives, because we can look at it from the somatic side, which is like, just do what feels good. But is what feels good always what is valuable? Right? So I like to use that term a lot when I teach, and really use that for myself. Like, what sort of value does this hold for me? Is this valuable? Because we've gone down this path of, like, good vibes only, and, you know, we know that that's all bullshit anyways, because life is not just that. And so I really encourage people to, whether you're a teacher or you're a yoga student, or, you know, you're curious about yoga or anything like that, just even in life, like, what sort of value does this hold for me? Because what feels good might not be valuable, and what is uncomfortable might be valuable, you know? So where does the value sit? Where does the, and then we have to start taking responsibility, and we have to start looking at our morals. And, you know, if you look at this in the tangible sense, I'll give an example of, like, in asana. If I'm teaching and I, you know, am presenting some options, I will not use the word modification. I always say, how do you want to personalize this pose? Or what's a valuable variation that you want to play with right now? And then I'll go on to present, you might want to just do what immediately feels good for you. And somatically, you're just right away like, oh, that feels good, I'm going to do that. But you might then take it even further and go, okay, and this is where I will present information. If you, you know, explore pulling your body forcefully into a hamstring stretch, this does not equate to long-term benefits because you are forcing your body into a position, and this puts strain on the tendons and the ligaments. If you want an immediate sensation of hamstring stretch, you might choose to do that, and that's your choice, right? And you might want that immediately. If you are more invested in a long-term outcome and more honoring of like your body's system and its biomechanics, you might approach this pose with more strength and stability. And it's a lot of words, and a lot of yoga teachers are like, that's too much words and I don't want to talk too much. But for me, I'm like, let's come back to the intention. Are you facilitating a performance? Are you orchestrating a choreography? Or are you presenting opportunities for your students to actually feel into what it is that they need, and how to connect with themselves, and how to discern?
And it's all like, anyone can strike a balance. It's like, you don't want to be, what do they say, the race commentator with all the different cues and stuff like that. But at the same time, if you're theming a whole class around a peak pose, like I think I saw you put something up about a twist recently, and so you could show them like that they can actually get into the twist by using their body to kind of hinge a little bit without obviously damaging the body. But then for that like final version of it, now you've shown your body you can get into that. Cool, let's get into it without forcing it in. And like you said, strengthening all the little muscles around it for the long-term benefit. And so you don't have to do like the million cues every time.
Totally.
But I think like a really good class for me, both as a student and a teacher, is one that, really hones around like a peak idea, whether it's a theme, doesn't have to be a peak pose. And there's lots of space for it. And I think people they want to do as many poses at once, and some of the best classes I've ever been to just been a few different poses that we repeat, but we go deeper and deeper and deeper.
The layers.
Each time.
Yeah, totally. And I agree with that, because I think that, and this is a lot of conversations that I have, with yoga teachers, because I do mentoring for yoga teachers, and a lot of the things that they're saying is like, how do I just want to get a flow. I want to get a flow. How do I present a flow? I want it to be. And every time I hear that and I unpack it with them, they're so attached to this performance, right? And like students not wanting to be interrupted, if you will, or a fear. A lot of times this isn't even affirmed, right? And like, who told you that this is a worry that you should have, right? Have you confirmed this with your students? And they're like, no, right? Like, are your students coming to you and saying, oh, you keep explaining things and it's just too beneficial, and I'm not getting, I'm not getting a flow, you know?
My hip doesn't hurt anymore since coming to your classes.
But like, I need to flow. But this is where then, as you said, it's the integration and the incorporation of other kinds of movement modalities that are coming into a practice where it's like, it can be really nice, and it is therapeutic for some people to just move and not have too many words and just be able to move. But what I mostly see is I just want to perform. And call the pose, and I'll just do it because I know exactly where to place my body because this is correct. So there's not still in that situation. What I'm seeing is that it's still coming back to the same problem. It's still a performance. There's not a lot of time to explore and discern and decipher and discover what is actually working for someone. So they're just, it's like, I always think it in gymnastics. It's like, stick it. They're like, I will stick it. I will stick the pose. And that's kind of what's happening. And then as yoga teachers, we think that's what we have to facilitate for people. And so what I encourage yoga teachers to do is like, is that actually what you value? Like, and yes, it's hard because if you're teaching for someone else and that's all the classes you get and that's what the studio owner wants you to do, man, it's tough. I totally get it, But I think at some point you have to look at what your values are. And you have to decide, like, that doesn't sit well with me. And then create an opportunity where you can actually grow that style and express that.
And it comes down to, it's like, okay, what's more important? Whether you benefit your students to the best of your ability or that they like you.
100%.
Because really, like, and it's a tricky one because you're like, oh, I can't, I got to be admitted, like, I want them to like me. And you can strike a balance. Like, no one's going to come back to a class of a teacher that they really don't like. But it's just explaining. And so, like, I think what I've kind of, like, worked on is giving them that flowy stuff at the start, giving them what they want, what they're familiar with. And then, giving them maybe 20-30% of stuff that, like, they feel uncomfortable with. Because too much discomfort, it throws them off.
They'll disconnect.
A similar thing?
Yeah, for sure. And, that's something for me that I'm always playing around with. Like, I want to provide, like, because I have this sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I equip you with the knowledge to discern.
Yeah.
And then I'm fully aware that, like, my passion for that can actually be overwhelming for people sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, luckily for most people, they'll just tune out and they'll only hear what they need to hear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to acknowledge and recognize that that's something that I need to constantly tinker with as to like, how do I balance and harmonize my, this moral compass that I am guided by, which is like, I want to be able to equip people with information so that they can make a decision that aligns with them. But then also know that sometimes a lot of information is going to be overwhelming for people. And I tend to err on the side of like, I still want to stay in my what I believe is like my sense of responsibility for delivering a physical practice.
Yeah.
And so I tend to err on the side of like, I will give more information, but I'm doing it, as you said, with repeating things. So I'm giving the information, I'm giving the context, and then I'm allowing the space. I've said this enough times. How is this feeling? Are you doing what is feeling good, or are you experimenting with something that feels perhaps unfamiliar, but you know there's value to it?
Yeah.
And then just leaving it, So I'm still, like, as you said, we all have our blind spots, and I know that's one for me for sure, where I'm like dancing between like, but I need to give you more, and then I'm like, but I just like trust they've got what they need, and if they never come back to you again, that's fine.
Yeah.
And it's likely you'll probably see them again next week.
Yeah. Yeah, but I like the wording you used earlier with the invitation. I think that's all you can do.
Yeah.
And I think, well, it's not actually. You can force people into the pose, which a lot of people think is the right way to do it. But I think based on what we've chatted about, neither of us would agree that that's the right thing to do. And I think that's a difference, I think, in some teachers. They're like, okay, no, everyone has to have this experience in the class. And if they're not doing it willingly, I'm going to make them have this experience.
Yeah.
And, I know a friend who went and did her yoga teacher training. And on one of the last days when her body was exhausted, she just got forced into the pose and she ended up getting a bad injury for it. And she ended up having to stop yoga for a while. And
I feel like I've just heard of a totally similar story. I wonder if it's the same person.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to discuss after.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a common thing because, the body gets exhausted and then, you're trusting that the teacher knows what they're doing, especially after a certain amount of time with them.
Yeah.
And then boom. And, she didn't want to say anything initially as well because she thought it was something to do with her. And it was only really later that she realized that, like, it didn't even occur to her straight away that they did something wrong. It was later she realized like their negligence and stuff like that. And so that's why I'm constantly trying to find a balance because I generally don't do physical adjustments. So this is also being a male in an industry which has had a lot of fucked up shit happen, which is obviously like a big reason for that. But also,
I'll just say it is unfortunate that you've been painted with that brush. Right? Like, as a lot of us are, right?
Yeah.
That you have to be so careful, whether you wanted to do hands-on adjustments or not, right?
Yeah.
But just as a side note, like it's another point of awareness for...
But it's been beneficial in the way that I'm maybe, hyper aware of how I'm perceived and invading people's space.
Sure.
But I've noticed that because of that, I have a great respect of people's individual experiences of the class and of the pose, where I see a lot of people talking about they've been adjusted in ways that could either physically hurt them or actually just jolted them out of the practice and they felt uncomfortable for the rest of the class.
Yeah.
And, I will say certain cues lots of different times and try to give energetic adjustments where I invite them to reach deep. It's like, here, hold a block. Can you press your hand towards this? Or can you reach for this? Or reach for this?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll say cues like 3 or 4 times and they don't respond. And I was like, they're just in their head.
Totally. They're just trying to survive. Like, they're
exactly.
Only able to bring in so much.
Yeah, and, I have had classes where it's funny as well, like the non-dualism. Like, we think we have to go to yoga and be perfectly clear-headed. We have to be super zen and leave everything behind. Where sometimes I'll go to a yoga class and by the end of it, I know the decision I need to make.
Yeah.
Like, I'll go in, I'm like flustered, I have no idea, and I'll be churning on this decision. But I get what I need. And at the end of it, and probably right at the end of Shavasana, like, it'll drop in, I'm like, oh, So I've been able to keep my body busy,
Yeah.
and like my subconscious and conscious mind have kind of been just like playing around in the background, working shit out.
Yeah.
And then by the end of it, I knew it. And
Yeah.
so yes, I probably was neglecting my body a bit. I was very much in my mind, but I got what I needed out of the thing. And so it's like removing the idea that we know what they need.
100%,
In the class,
yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
like you said, inviting, giving them lots of offers, a lot of repetition, but just, you know, and it is hard. I get it. Like
Yeah.
I always like find it hard to let go of
Yeah.
the responsibility.
Yeah, to just trust that like they're going to get what they need and you don't have to micromanage, and it's also not a reflection of you.
Yeah.
Always, right? Like, yeah, you take responsibility in knowing that there are some outcomes in the class that are because of what you've done as a teacher.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, you know when you practice, you're just in your own world.
Yeah.
Right? And I really like what you spoke to, because I am in full agreement that a lot of times we've replaced what it means to practice with performance, right? Like I go to yoga and I am a yogi, right? As opposed to like I'm what people would say is that, right? Like, oh, my practice, it wasn't that great because my mind was busy and this and that. And you're like, but that's your practice. It's not a performance. Like the essence of a practice is that it's ever evolving, and you are putting something into practical application, not just aligning to the theory or the idea of it, but you're practically applying that in a practical sense to practice how that plays out and what that looks like and what that is for that day and that time. So I think it's beautiful that you've brought that, to the surface to say like, yeah, sometimes I'd be doing a practice and it's just ticking, but you've gotten something from it, right? And so I think it's just allowing more of that acceptance and that openness of like what a practice actually is, and letting go of, firstly, recognizing, have I started to treat my practice as a performance? Right? Like just that question. I'm going to get curious about that. I'm going to do some self-inquiry.
Yeah. And that's the thing. They might need that on that day as
Sure.
well. Like
Yep.
it might be like, okay, I'm not feeling very good about myself, and yoga's the only thing that I feel like I can control in my life right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like I can do this well.
Yeah.
And so you might go there, perform, and get a confidence boost.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like being aware on the other side of that, how that can be detrimental, in that if you don't perform the way you expected to perform, is that going to then lead to this negative thought spiral after?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a tricky balance.
It is, yeah. And to add to that, like I have a lot of teachers say to me, oh, well, my students just really love that they get to come and I make all the decisions for them. That, right? Like this is a big thing that Beacon would say. He was like, it's my brain and your body, which is like really, really just like red flag, right?
Yeah.
But we're kind of just perpetuating that in a less obvious way, which is to say like, oh, well, you just get to switch off. Why? This is like the perfect opportunity for you to be held in a space where you can tune in. You don't have to think about really anyone else in like directly. Indirectly, yeah, of course you do. You're not going to like do things that are harmful to other people in the room. But when you're on your mat, but I mean, that's the practice of being able to tune into yourself. So that should be the time where you heighten, your discernment of what you need and what's working and what's not working. But a lot of people have used it, I guess, in a roundabout way. Not to say that there's not benefits to this, but as an escape. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's also, again, like all these different ways of being or feeling, they have purpose. But then there's a point, I think, where it's important to examine, like, is that serving me? Where is the value? And I think there is a natural organic process that comes from, something not working, and just naturally it's like, I don't want to do that thing anymore. I used to do it all the time and I don't do it anymore. Or else you stay in that thing, but you change it. You change it from within instead of abandoning it or something like that. It starts to evolve and it becomes different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't look at the bigger picture as
Right.
well. They don't really realize that there's certain things that they can or should be, working towards as far as bigger goals. They just usually want that instant gratification
Sure.
to feel good. And,
Yeah.
and that works great as a business model for
Yeah.
yoga teachers, because
Yeah.
they'll keep coming in and keep
That's
getting
right.
their dose and all that sort of stuff. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's trying to like take home tools, but also, some people admittedly don't like it, but what I try to do, get them into a flow where I'm leading them for quite a while, and then offer them like a little choose your own adventure section.
Yeah, yeah.
And disorients
Right.
students sometimes, because suddenly they go from completely being led, and then they, you've seen this, they dart their eyes around looking at everyone else, or I need to follow someone else, but then trying to just like, say, look, I've given you a few tools for this section, so you can choose A, B, or C, but like learning to listen again, that cue to your own body. But like, what does that look like for you? Like, does your body need rest today? Like, how are you feeling? Do you have extra energy running through your body? And if so, what would help with that? What do you need out of the situation?
Totally.
Because in yoga they call it pratibha, which is kind of like your internal compass.
Okay.
But again, it's like, what part of that is the right one? And they don't really even know how to answer that. And they kind of like, as I understand, it's something that I've been personally, so my main focus like lately, the last couple of years, has been what the F is pratibha to me, like trying to find my own internal compass and
what guides you.
And what part of me do I listen to? Because I've noticed that when I'm trying to find that, there's lots of different me's.
Totally.
But we all the me's want to have different goals. It's like, okay, well, that, exactly what you're talking about. That me just wants to feel good, to do what I was doing. That me wants to perform because I know the teacher and I want to, show that I know how to do this pose. And the other me is just like, well, I've got a shoulder injury, and so I shouldn't be doing this. And then there's another me that's just trying to think about what I'm having for dinner. And, it's just like all this other stuff. Like, which one do I listen to?
But that's the beauty of the practice, is that you're practicing tuning in and connecting in. And that's going to be messy. Right? Like, it's supposed to be, because we have so much to filter through, right? Like, we live so out of alignment with nature, with our natural way of being. And so we have so much to filter through. And I mean, our lives are like that by design, because coming back to, again, the more distracted we are, the more we have to filter through, the easier we are to control and manipulate. And so, when we then get into our practice, and then we dismiss all these different things that are coming up because we think we have to just be one certain way, then that in itself is just perpetuating the very thing that we don't want to continue. Right? But acknowledging that, like, there's a lot to filter through. And I think that we have to recognize, like, where, what are the kind of purposes that yoga is serving this modern society right now. Because that is probably different than the purposes that it was serving the society, hundreds of years ago. We are very different. We live totally different lives. So like, what is the practical modern application of these ideas with these people that are here right now? And that's why it feels, again, like, to circle back to the Yoga Sutras, people with families, like, telling everyone we got to live by the Yoga Sutras. It's like, but you have a family, like, like, do you want to pass on to your kids that, like, you should really hate your body and all that sort of stuff? And this is stuff we're trying to escape from, that has been pushed onto us through even other religious systems and things. And so it's, what parts, exactly, like, circling back to what is actually happening through these belief systems. And I think that's the biggest thing, I think, that yoga was trying to do in a grander sense, is understanding that we can actually change our belief system, that reality isn't set. Like you said, there's certain universal principles or universal laws that kind of happen, but they're actually not that many of them when we break down. And a lot of yoga was really trying to, without all the stories, without all these layers of perception that we've put on, what is actually happening. And totally. It's, something that is really difficult to do. And there's actually debates whether that's even possible. Because how do we experience something without the label? And we have little glimpses of this, but again, it's not very practical sometimes. It's like people say, oh, we're all one, we're all connected. And we've had that, whether it's in like a plant medicine experience or a deep meditation. But at the same time, you have to go into traffic. And you have to contribute to society in some way.
And again, this is why a lot of the tantric scriptures and the tantric ideas, and so I try to, like, we touch on the Yoga Sutras, but like, don't focus on them at all, because these are for monks. Like, these practices are for monks. And so if you want to live in a monastery or live in the forest or isolate in a cave, Yoga Sutra, and escape the world and never come back, definitely focus on the Yoga Sutras. They're going to be really beneficial to you. But if you want to, like, integrate in society and have a family and you want to be in the world, then there's definitely better better ones to do. Yeah.
Wow. And that's so important, I think, for people to understand and to know about, because I reckon that would just be like a massive weight lifted actually for a lot of people, because, you know, as we've said, like people's, for the most part, 99% of people, their intention is in the right place, right? They have that purity of like, of true heart, and of, you know, coming forward and approaching these things with an honorable intention. But it's just, as you said, the ideas that we're fed, that we don't question, that we attach to, that actually will prevent us from honoring that intention. And so it's so nice to hear like that, the difference between these things. I think for a lot of people it would just be like, oh yeah, that's a big relief. Like I didn't align with that, but I felt like I should. And now, okay, there's this other side.
Yeah, and just really realizing what happens with this idea of teachers and pedestaling. And like, it's funny that we give yoga teachers or like spiritual teachers so much credibility in every aspect of life, right? It's like, you know, they, you know, if someone is a trade person, they know how to build a house, you wouldn't necessarily ask them for advice about, you know, philosophy or about certain, you know, or about a surgeon. And it's we give credibility to the spiritual industry in ways that we don't normally. Like, imagine if, you know, you have to have surgery and the surgeon's like, oh, I've done surgery for my past 5 lifetimes. Yeah. And you're like, okay, well, but have you actually done any training in this lifetime? No, but I don't need to. Yeah, I know everything. And like, I actually have the real insight on surgery, so I'm way better. Yeah. Like, I don't know, like, you know, how would you feel about getting surgery from that person?
You'd have to have some deep trust on that.
Yeah, but in the kind of spiritual industry, it seems to be the normal go-to.
Yeah.
But also realizing like what you were talking about before, in that when you're being guided and you're kind of submitting to being guided, then it, without even realizing, that trickles into other things that happen. And so, because I have a background in sales, they made us study sales psychology and even ideas of NLP and hypnotism and stuff. And it's so crazy what happens. Like a simple thing, like the first thing you learn in like hypnosis or hypnotherapy and stuff is you say 2 or 3 things that are true and that the person knows are true. And then after that, they're more likely to agree with everything you say after, because you've confirmed. You know, and so one thing, like, so you're sitting here, so you're sitting on the pillow and your shoulders are relaxed, and then I can start to say other things, which, because the first 2 or 3 things I said to you were true, then the rest must be true.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and just, you know, and we don't mean to do this, and like, I know this can naturally happen, and so like, again, like for my students, try to ask them the question, but as a student as well, just realize that like your teacher is human and they're flawed, and you know, there's just so much to learn, and they might not have all the right answers or all the information, and probably don't. They
don't, that's right. And I think that's one of the most important things that you can like equip your students with, but just even in life in general. Like, I remember when I did we did like a year-long kind of workshop series with, I had about 6 women in there, and it was just, I called it a return to empowerment. And it was, you know, we would meet like every month, and we would have different things that we did just for them to utilize their yoga practice as a way to come back to their personal empowerment. Yeah. And at the end of it, it was interesting because, actually, no, it was kind of in the middle. One of the women said, like, I just don't go and practice anywhere else because I don't feel like people hold space for me, right? And then we revisited that at the end, and I was like, the whole like point of this is for you to utilize your own power, so that no matter who is teaching you, no matter what they're trying to get you to do, no matter what the influence is, the 2 truths and the lies, you know, you are able to still discern and utilize your own you know, wisdom and knowing, so that you can feel more connected, and it's not dependent upon the teacher or the influencer, right? Because we are all going to be influenced. That's just natural. And if you can, you know, put yourself sometimes in situations where you know you're going to be slightly susceptible, obviously if it's safe, but like, I know I'm going to be slightly susceptible to being influenced here. Can I practice putting up my boundaries? Right? Like, we need to have those experiences, I think.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And that's what really I think the world needs more of. Like, everyone's trying to be protected, and it's like they just assume that no one knows how to protect themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, instead of protecting, how about we just share the tools of how to self-protect?
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, it's like this, trying to spread this, like, stop this misinformation. It's like, okay, yeah, you could invest a lot of time into that. How about you give everyone the tools of how to do their own research?
Yeah.
Like, how about you give them the tools of discernment, right?
Yeah.
You know, instead of, you know, saying that, like, you should never go to any other yoga class or do this, how about we learn the psychology of how we automatically get swept up by charisma and get coaxed into doing these cultish things, and like how do cults work, and like what you know, and just understanding what is naturally happening, so we have the skills to do that ourselves, rather than just be protected, right?
And be reliant, right? That's the thing. So many things in our lives we've outsourced. We outsource everything. Does anyone grow their own food? Does anyone supply their own food? They don't even know how their food gets to their plate, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's convenient. We live in a world of convenience, so we are constantly outsourcing things.
Yeah.
And this ties into the melding of cultures, right? Like, why is it okay and necessary to acknowledge some things that you use that are not from your cultural background, but not others, right? Like, pay attention to what you're being fed and what you're being told to care about. And just again, coming back to that discernment of like, how do I actually see things as they are, not how I've been told they should be. Yeah.
Really great. So I think we've hit the 2-hour mark. So I'm sure there's lots more. Like, I wanted to maybe even chat with you more about, like, because before this we were talking about how important marketing is as a yoga teacher and all that sort of stuff. But maybe that might be another podcast.
One. Yeah,
I'm
for
we can talk lots about that. But yeah, just to tail end it. So yeah, is there anything you want to leave everyone with? Is just some last little bits of advice on just to, like, everything we've talked about, and also what you're doing as well, because you mentioned you were mentoring teachers, and I think that's such a valuable thing to do, because I know I have felt really isolated alone as a yoga teacher, and even just knowing that that's available to even just have these conversations as well. But mentoring is really, really valuable. So yeah, if you want to just share what you're doing as well.
Yeah,
what you're
sure.
offering in regards to that.
Yeah, I think, like, as you said, I am doing work with mentoring yoga teachers. And interestingly enough, you know, I always kind of bring it back to the base level of, like, to tie in the other component that you were just talking about. How we're approaching things, is it from a place of fear? Because quite often, like, I got so many messages from yoga teachers saying, I have these same concerns and questions, but I was too scared to say anything. You know, just like for me, I was too scared to speak up. Someone else spoke up. Then I said, you know, this was my situation as well, right? So, like, just really start to look at where that fear is kind of governing you. And I mean, you just really, on some level, you have to be okay with discomfort. You know, just this idea that, like, we do everything in our lives to avoid discomfort. We're either addicted to feeling a certain way, or we constantly are avoiding feeling a certain way. It's just one of those two things that we're always doing. Yeah. And that's really coming again from that fear, right? And so I think it's just important to look at, like, where am I scared to say something, or where am I scared to question, or where am I scared to wonder, right? Like, we've lost this wonderment and this magic, right? Of wondering and being curious, and this innocence, right? Like, this pure innocence of just like a child. Yeah. Right? Of just, like, asking questions that were like, oh my God, that's so inappropriate. But, like, they're literally just wondering. Yeah. There's no malicious thing that's attached to it, right? But we really, I think, like to label people with having malicious intent when it's not actually really there.
Yeah, it's so much easier to just call people evil than actually look at, you know, the relativism of that.
Yeah. So, you know, that's always the base level of what I work from when I work with yoga teachers is the self-reflection. Because we can't really genuinely be able to step into the role of a teacher that we envision ourselves to be unless we are truly willing to self-reflect. And I'm sure there's lots of different variations and opinions as to what that actually means, but I just think asking questions is a really great place to start. And you know, assessing where you might just be following a narrative without actually understanding it, or you know, just really looking at the bigger picture of things. I think just kind of panning out, because we can get so caught up in the microscopic, like pan out and have a look at some of the macro, you know. So yeah, I do different kind of length of time mentorships with yoga teachers. Mostly it is centered around them just wanting to be more in their purpose of getting fulfillment from making an impact.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's really why we're all yoga teachers.
Yeah.
And then I utilize my experience in terms of like, okay, well, this is what I have experienced to really make an impact. And a lot of times that's really aligning with their observations as how I want to make my classes more curious and more inclusive and foster people's exploration and make it accessible. I don't know how to give modifications. I don't even know, my students don't want to do modifications because they think they're inferior, you know, and so then we're going back to the whole psychology of like what you're kind of dealing with and why it's Dharma talks, you know, like why it's important to actually talk about some of these things to your students and not just glaze over it and be like, this is a pretty yoga class. Like, this is a messy experience sometimes. And I want you to, you know, I invite you to explore if you're doing what you're doing right now because you think you should or because it's what's valuable for you. You know, and even just proposing those things to your students. And so that's, you know, the kind of stuff that I work with yoga teachers on. And it expands into like, how do I, you know, make complex poses available and accessible to all levels class, you know, like the real kind of like nuts and bolts of things. And then obviously more of the, you know, of this other stuff that we've been discussing as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And just for anyone listening, because we didn't dive into it, but we had some great discussions before the podcast just about like the business of yoga, and that seems to be a taboo thing as well. And it was like, oh, like, but yoga is such like a service to the world, but like, you know, not only are you not going to be able to give service to the world if you can't, you know, support yourself at the same time, you have to do other work and less of the service.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a big misunderstanding of how yoga used to be because of a different society.
Yeah.
And so we always come back to this term. It's like, oh, but they didn't charge for yoga back in the day, you know, back in India. It's like, because it was a different society. It's like, if I'm looked after, if I'm put up in a nice spot and I've got all my stuff taken care of and I can live a good life and I'm doing that in exchange for yoga, then that's it. But isn't that what's happening now? Yeah. It's just we use a different monetary system.
Totally.
So again, you know, won't go into it, but people like just to nip that in the bud, if you're charging for yoga, but also that people don't appreciate what they don't pay for.
Yeah. But, that's just the you know, society that we're in, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to, I mean, and I think you can make a change internally and that's great. And I think a lot of people are really invested in like, you know, community stuff. And I mean, as yoga teachers, just the fact that we're so fucking passionate about what we do, you've given heaps of shit away for free.
Yeah.
And you will continue to do that.
Yeah.
Just because you're charging for an actual physical class doesn't mean that you're still not giving away heaps of yoga value for free in other circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah, we've all done like, and it's a really good tool to have to give to charities and stuff like that for events to be able to run yoga classes. But there needs to be some kind of energetic exchange at least, because I've had a lot of people in the past talk to me how when they've done yoga classes or PT sessions or courses or things, and if they get it for free or there's no effort on their part to achieve that, like it just loses potency. And like how many free courses have we all signed up to that we haven't necessarily done? Or I remember when I used to PT, I had a lady come and I said, have you done a PT session in the past before? And she said, oh, yeah, but it was free, so I didn't take it seriously. I was like, you know, so it's just finding, you know, again, everything's relative. Some people genuinely want yoga and maybe can't afford it, and so it's finding those people and helping them as best you can, but also understanding that, you know, some people need that exchange to justify it for them that's going to be valuable. So but,
and for you on the end of the giver, right, then it's exactly the practical component of like, this takes my time and my energy, and that means that takes away from my ability to actually gain money, which helps me eat and have a roof over my head. Like, it's just a very practical, logical thing. It makes sense. Like, you know, this is where kind of my husband and I ran into he's always like doing this with me, and I'm like, you can't say that about this and about that, and he's like always the devil's advocate, which is great. But he, you know, he was like, how many hours is it okay to put into what you're doing before you say, well, it's not a fair exchange, right? And I was like offended because I was like, I love this, you know, and he was like, you will die on this hill. Like you'll, you know, take time away from us and you'll run yourself into the ground because you love it so much. And then when is that? Is it like 3 hours a week? It's a passion project? Great. 20 hours a week? You probably need to be financially compensated for that. Yeah. You know, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. I feel like we could talk a lot about this. But I think the thing's going to cut us off if we don't wrap it up. But yeah, but thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so much more that we could chat about and discuss. And yeah, definitely reach out to Jenelle because it really helps to just have someone to chat to about all this sort of stuff. And I think that personable-ness of it, of being able to see what actually you need individually. And I think that's what's kind of like been a big theme of the whole chat is like, there's this blanket that we all just throw over everything, but in the end, we all kind of need individual things, unique things. So.
Yeah, and not shit on other people in the process of you finding that.
Don't shit on other people in the process of finding yourself. That's a great tagline to end. Thanks, Jenelle.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to and being a part of this episode of the House of Mages podcast. You can find all the info about myself, the House of Mages, and my guests for this episode in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, it means so much if you subscribed or left a review. It helps us massively to grow, know that people are listening, and ultimately to do this more. Thanks for being a part of these magical musings from mischievous minds. Until next time, remember to seek above all for a game worth playing.
In this house of mages, in this house of mages.